Welcome back, guys. This is Nicholas from Moralis, and this is episode number 6 of our tutorial series where we are cloning RARIBLE using Moralis. In the previous episode, we finished up the feature to create the item, store the metadata on IPFS, and also store some more additional information about the item in our own database on Moralis. In this episode, we will focus on creating the contract for the ERC 721 token that will represent our NFTs. So what we want to do first is to make a new folder for our contracts. So make their contracts here in the terminal, and let's just enter its contracts. And here we want to run truffle init to set up the boilerplate that we need to create stuff with solidity. So truffle init, and we're done. So let's go in here and create a new file, and we can call it RARIBLE token.sol. The next thing that we need is to implement the OpenZeppelin contracts that will do the heavy lifting for us. So let's do npm install at OpenZeppelin/contracts, and it will install everything here. The next thing that we need to do is to set up Ganache to work with our project here. So let's make a new workspace. We can call it RARIBLE, and then we can add the truffle config file that we have here in Visual Studio Code. And then we just save workspace. The next thing that we need to do is we can go in here, node modules, the token, the ERC 721, go in here, and we can copy the Solidity version to our own contract so that we will work with the same version. And this version we can copy here and also paste in our config file down here where it says version, so that the compiler will use the same one. Then we can import the different files that we will need. So we can do a right click on the ERC 721 token contract, and then we can copy relative path. And then we can go back into our contract here and type import, and then we paste. And we want to do the same with utils counters. So copy relative path, go in here, import, and paste. And as we need to replace the contracts with ... And we also need to replace the backslashes with the / to make it work. And then after this is done, we can declare our contract, contract RARIBLE token. I think it's a fitting name. It is ERC 721. We can open it up. We can do our counter for our IDs. So we can do using counters for counters.counter. And then we can do counters.counter private token IDs. So this will be our counter for our IDs. And as you see here, we need also to pass some parameters into the constructor of this contract. So let's define a constructor, and we don't need anything for ourselves, but the ERC 71 needs the name of the token, which is RARIBLE token, and then we can also give it a symbol. Let's call it Mora, and then we can just have an empty body like this. The next thing that we need to do is to define our item. So let's do a struct, and then we can call it item, and it will contain the ID of the item. And let's just do the address of the creator, and then we can have the string of the URI, and this will point to the metadata that we will store on IPFS. And then we can define a mapping for this. So mapping, we will map the ID, the uint 256, to an item that has that ID, and we can call it items, and we can also make it public. Okay, and then we need a function to mint this. So let's do a function. We can call it create item, and it will take a string memory of the URI, and it will returns. First of all, it's public returns the ID. So, and that is of type uint256. uint256, and inside here we can start by incrementing our counters. So token IDs dot increment, and then we can store the current ID in uint and 256 new item ID equals token IDs dot current. So this is the ID for our new item, and so the first item will have ID 1. And then we can mint this. So we can do save mint of our item here. So let's do the msg.sender. This is the creator, and then the new item ID. So this will assign the ownership of this ID to this sender. And then we can add this, create an item and store it in our mapping. So let's do items of the new item ID. That will be equal to a new item. So item, and it will have the ID of new item ID. It will have the creator of msg.sender, and it will have the URI that the user entered. And then we can return the new item ID. So this is it for the creation, the minting. And we also need to override the default implementation of the get the URI. So token URI, this we need to override because our structure of the URL will not have like an incremental path that is relative to the token ID. So what we need to do is to go back to here, paste this, and we can remove virtual, and we can remove this implementation. And what we need to do is just to take this and do return this dot URL. So we can look at the URL, we take this token ID, put it here, and we return the URL, or not the URL, URI. So this will work. So what we want to do now is just to migrate this to Ganache. So we do truffle migrate. And let's see if we made any mistakes or if this will work without any problems. So it's compiling, and of course we also need a migration file. So let's do to token migration.js, and we can just go here, we can copy all of this, we can go here, we can take the name of the token, and we can just replace it here, here, and here, and then we can do truffle migrate dash dash reset. Perfect. So now we have it says deploying Rarible token, and this is our token address. So what we want to do now is to copy this, go into our main.js and make a reference for the address here. So let's do const token contract address. Oops. This, and it will be equal to our address here. So in the next part, we will actually call the create item function in this contract, and we will configure everything and check so that everything is added. And we will also see how the ownership of this token that is now owned by that user will automatically get imported into the Moralis database because we have Moralis taking care of us in the backend. So see you guys in the next part.